I grew up in a little farming community near Rexburg. It was 12 miles out of Rexburg. The name of it was Archer. The people that lived there were all LDS, and most of us came from the pioneer people that came across the plains. And so as a girl, I learned how to help on the farm. I learned how to take care of animals, how to take care of the cows. I learned to ride a horse, and I rode with my friends when I was a teenager a lot. We went to the canal, and the boys would throw us in, and we thought that was great, but we did that on Sunday. I always felt guilty about that, but not guilty enough to stay home. When I went to Ricks College, I lived in the dorms, and one of my roommates was getting married, and her boyfriend lived with Gerald. He told Gerald, "I found the girl you're going to marry." And so he said, "I can get you a blind date with her. Do you want a blind date with her?" And he said, "Well, let me look at her first." So he was in charge of home teaching. And he came to our apartment because we had been sometimes missing Relief Society. At that time, I didn't think Relief Society was for girls my age. I didn't need it. I didn't want it. But Gerald used that as an excuse to come and talk to our apartment about what we needed to do in the church. And so when he came, I thought, well, he's a haughty old guy. And he thought we were giggly girls, but he went back and told Jean, "Yes, I'll go with her." So, we made the date. It was to a dinner dance. And I put on my formal, and I bought him a boutonniere, and he bought me a corsage. And here he came with a corsage and a radio. Why do you need a radio at a dinner dance? You don't need a radio at a dinner dance. We went into the dinner dance. He turned on his radio and listened to the BYU basketball game where we were at the dinner dance. And I thought, well, this guy's just nuts. And so, but I liked him. And the next day he called and said, "Would you go out with me Wednesday, Tuesday, and Monday?" He was so worked up that he didn't say Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. He said it backwards. And so we went out Wednesday, Tuesday, and Monday. He was there going to school to learn how to teach and how to weld because the shop teacher in Mexico had died, and the director offered him a job, but he needed to come and learn how to do all the shop things. So he was there doing that. So he went home, and he didn't ever call me, but he said he'd write. He wrote, I think, 2 letters. And then in July, he stopped. So I didn't have anything more to do with him or anybody from there until I was a senior in college at BYU, Utah. And I had a class with a girl from the colonies. And I asked her, "Did Gerald Hatch ever get married?" And she said, "Oh, no, you need to write to him." I said, "Okay." And because I said, "Okay," that seemed like a promise to me. So I went home and wrote him and gave him a little synopsis of what I did and where I was, and I was going to graduate in education, and that was going to be just great. His mother would not let him eat until he answered my letter, because by then he was 25 and she was sick and tired of this grouchy old guy. There were no girls to marry in the colonies, and he tried to like her. Everybody in town wanted him to like her. He could not like her. So she went home. I wrote him. He called me and said, "My parents are coming up into Utah next week. Would you come down with them? Would you ride down with them?" And I thought, well, that's great. I don't know this guy, but I can go to a foreign country because I've never been to a foreign country before. He said, "My brother is Fred Hatch." And so I didn't ask him for the phone number. He didn't give me the phone number. I got a ride to Utah. And there I was without a phone number. I had a name. So I got the phone book and I started calling Fred Hatch. There were 13 of them. He was about the third. And yes, they were there, and yes, they would leave in the morning, and they would come by and pick me up. We started into Mexico, and there were just, these houses made out of cardboard boxes with sometimes tin around it, and those were where people lived in Ciudad Juarez. I was shocked. When we got closer, I thought, well, I haven't seen this guy for 4 years. I don't know much about him. I have never talked to him. I only really knew him just for a few months in the spring. And so I thought, well, okay, shall I shake hands? Will I just say hello? Will I hug him? What shall I do? When we got to his house, he was outside waiting for us. And I walked towards him, and he bent down and kissed me on the lips. In August, Gerald brought some kids up to go to school, and he asked me, he came up and we went on a couple of dates, and he had a car, and he asked me if I wouldn't marry him. And I said, yes. We went to get a marriage license and got married January 30th, the day after school let out, and we were married. We went to Las Vegas on our honeymoon, and we started our family. We had a good life, and every other year we had a baby. So that's my start at Gerald. I just loved having children. I loved it. When we were dating at Rexburg, at Rex, Jared said, I'm only going to have boys. And I laughed and thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard, because he couldn't say. And I said, oh, I'm only going to have girls then. And when we started having boys, I thought, I know Gerald's over on his side of the bed praying for a boy, and I'm over here praying for a girl, and he's a better man than me because the Lord answered all his prayers, not mine. But it was wonderful. It was difficult. We didn't have a lot of money. And so, because we had a lot of boys, well, a lot of hand-me-downs, I would buy clothes, they just hand down. You don't need everything. That money can't buy you happiness. That a lot of the things that most of my friends and my family had, I was not going to have, I would never have. And I learned to be happy with what I had. The only thing that matters is the church and your family. Our house burned down once, and the only thing that was saved were things that were used and old. Most of the really good things that we had by then burned up. And I learned that the only thing that matters is family and church. We didn't suffer. We never suffered. But we never had a lot of extra. And my kids now have easier lives, but they have learned to do hard things, and so did I. Gerald grew up doing hard things, so he already knew, and he taught us how to do hard things. And as I watch my children raise their children, I see that they are trying to teach them how to do hard things. My grandchildren are good and smart and strong, and they can do hard things. And that came from living in Mexico, where you didn't have everything you wanted. And I'm glad.